Hey, Dad.
Hey, Jen.
What are you listening to this week? Welcome to What Are You Listening to This Week, the weekly podcast where we talk about our favorite songs. Some old, some new, all good. I'm Jenn Tully, and this week, to celebrate my 26th episode, that's half a year, listeners, I'm joined by maybe the single greatest influence on my love of music, my dad, A.W. Hunter. Also, did you know that now on Spotify, you can listen to the show with the songs we discuss incorporated? Just search for What Are You Listening to This Week with Music. And if you're not listening on Spotify, be sure to give the playlist a listen and then tune into our conversation. With that, let's get started. Dad, what are you listening to this week?
Uh, I've got two songs that I come up with that I like, and that's the first one is Fraulein by Bobby Helms, and the second one is one of my all-time favorites is uh, He'll Have to Go by Jim Reeves.
All right. Well, tell me about this Bobby Helms song. Why Fraulein? Why did you pick this one?
I don't know, just it's always been a favorite of mine, and they used to kind of call it. They called it the Texas national anthem at the barn dances and the honky tonks and things like that, because every band that come around at some time or other would cover "Fraulein" as one of their songs for the night. And also, it was my dad, which was your granddad.
Yep.
It was one of his favorite songs too, and about the only country song I ever heard him sing. The only other thing I'd hear him sing was gospel songs.
Yeah. Yeah, I can remember hearing him sing Fraulein too. So I often think of Grandpa whenever I hear this song. And now we picked the Bobby Helms version for this show. Do you know what year that song originally came out? Was he the original artist to do it?
Yes, he was. I think it was around 1957 when his record was released of it, and then wasn't long after that. I think probably either late '57 or early '58, something like that. Hank Lachlan uh, did a version also, which I think was really bigger than Bobby Helms.
Yeah, I feel like so many people have done this song. I feel like I've heard it from many artists. And like you said, anytime you're at a bar or dancing and there's a live band, it's not weird to hear Fraulein, at least in Texas, at least at least in the dance halls here. I'm not sure about everywhere else, but I think if you're in a honky tonk, this is a pretty common song to hear. And for your second pick, you chose what song did you choose for your second pick?
He'll Have to Go by Jim Reeves.
Oh, right, right. So why this song? What do you love about this song?
Oh man, just Jim Reeves himself. He just such a velvet smooth voice, and he anything he sang was good. And I don't know, I always just thought this was kind of the ultimate in a country song, and I really enjoyed listening to it. And another thing I think kind of stuck with me is he was one of the first big time entertainers that I remember, dying at a young age, and
Oh,
then a string of them from that point on.
yeah. Did you ever see him or Bobby Helms live? You were probably too little when they were playing.
No, I never did. I never did see either one of them live. But of course, when Bobby Helms came out with his, that was in '57. I would have only been 10 years old then, and I don't remember exactly when Jim Reeves died, but I never was fortunate enough to see him in concert or anything.
And was he young when he passed away? Did he have a sort of a tragic end, like a Buddy Holly or someone like that? I don't even remember how Jim Reeves passed.
Well, I was trying to remember myself. I believe Now, I'm not positive about this, but I believe he was killed in a plane crash also.
Okay. Okay. I can remember also too, this song is one of those that I remember, I attributed you in the intro as being sort of my first influence in terms of love of music. And we always had music on in the car. We often had music on in the house. And this is one that I remember always hearing in the car. I don't know if we had, must have had a Jim Reeves cassette or something that played. But every time I hear this song, I think of us driving. And for listeners, my dad, when I was young, well, and into my adulthood, actually owned an inventory service, and so he traveled around about 15 states in the U.S. And so, how much of your time would you say you spent on the road, Dad? Probably, I don't know, 70% of the time you were on the road a
Uh,
lot.
I was on the road a lot, and boy, music was my savior. To keep me awake and keep me interested in things that was going on around me and everything. And I don't know, I just loved to listen to music. And
Well,
that Jim Reeves was probably on an 8 track, if the truth
it
was
might have been.
known.
It might have been. Now you're making me sound. It's okay if we make you sound old, but we can't make me sound old. Yeah, it might have been. Actually, when I think about it now, I feel like I can see the 8 track. The label was kind of peeling off. It was an old one. But those are some of my earliest memories. Of us just driving around, or me being with you on a work trip during the summertime, and just that's almost looking out the window and listening to music and talking about the songs. Those are some of my favorite memories. And still, if I'm super stressed out, or I'm struggling, or I need to think or get my creativity going, I'll often still hop in the car, turn on some music, and drive around, and I just feel better afterwards. So I'll always be grateful to you for that, because I do love music, and I do love listening when driving, especially. And that Jim Reeves song always reminds me of that. Well, as we're transitioning into influential songs that I got from my dad, or that remind me of my dad, I'm gotta pick. This is an all-time favorite that I don't know how many times we've listened to it and how many times we've belted it out in the car. But for my first pick, I'm gonna go with the country classic "Amarillo by Morning" by George Strait. Now, Amarillo by Morning is one of those songs. Last week we had some country songs on the show that Matt Sidholm brought, and we were talking about Flatland Cavalry and how, they wrote a really beautiful, sort of Americana sounding song in Damaged Goods. And I think Amarillo by Morning for me is really a perfect country song, not necessarily Americana music or, red dirt, but a perfect country song. It tells a story. You have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You know what this guy is going through. And for me, I don't think you get a better country music voice than George Strait. It's just, anytime I hear him, it just sounds like what I want country music to sound like always. And of course, we've talked about this since I was a kid. You're responsible for my love of the old classics, Loretta Lynn and Patsy Cline and Hank Williams, and all of the original greats of country music. And then, of course, the older artists too that we talked about on the Western Swing issue a little bit, or episode a little bit. But for me, George Strait's just kind of the pinnacle. He's the master and the king of country music. And I don't even have to ask if you've ever heard this song, because I know you have. But what do you think about Amarillo by Morning?
Oh, it's great. It's a great song. Uh, it's just it's just pure country is all you can say about Amarillo by Morning. It's just a great country song, and I even heard the song before George Strait recorded it. There was a jukebox in a little cafe in Amarillo, Texas, that had the song on there. The guy was from Amarillo, Texas, that did Amarillo by Morning, and he also his big song. I can't remember the guy's name, but his big song was "Suspicion." Was
Mm.
the big song that he did, but when George Strait come out with Amarillo by Morning, I kept thinking, and I've heard that song before, and that's where it was. I heard it at this little cafe in Amarillo that had it on jukebox.
Yeah, it's such a great song, and I know that Straight Country album was one that we always had. Again, another 8 track or cassette that we always had in the car, and so many, George Strait's greatest hits, that first version, and so anytime Amarillo by Morning came on, this was one we cranked up. And then you and I also had the pleasure of seeing him live at an event after the CMA Awards. I know we were sharing stories with some folks today about trips and memories and fun experiences that we've had together. And one year, the year actually that they held the CMA, the Country Music Awards in New York City, you and I were able to go and ended up at a party afterwards where George Strait and a bunch of fellow country artists sang this song around the piano. And you had sort of the who's who of country music at this event, and everybody was asking him to play Amarillo by Morning. Of all of his songs, of the entire George Strait catalog, this is the one. Do you remember that? Everybody was sort of shouting, play Amarillo by Morning, play Amarillo by Morning.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and that was actually that was 2005 was the year
Was
on
it?
that
Okay.
that it was in the CMAs was in New York City.
Okay. Yeah, I
But
couldn't remember.
yeah, yeah, that was a great trip. That was probably one of the most fantastic trips I ever made in my life.
Yeah, we had a good time that trip. We've had a lot of good trips, you and I. We were talking about that today, so it made me think about all the trips we've taken. But yeah, that one was a good one. And I think, again, testament to Amarillo by Morning when you got a room full of country superstars and that's the song they want to hear. So um, that'll always be a classic and one that we'll always love. The other song that I toyed back and forth with, the other George Strait song I was thinking of was Houston, and that was mainly from skiing. Remember when we'd go skiing in Crested Butte and they had that run that was called Houston, and we'd go down the mountain singing George Strait's song Houston.
Yeah,
So we were either in Amarillo or Houston, one of the two.
right, right.
Well,
Just so
my
long as we stayed in Texas, huh?
Right, as long as even though we were skiing in Colorado,
Yeah.
that's probably why the Coloradans hate Texans so much, right? Uh, One of the many reasons. We bought all their land. That's what I keep hearing. They don't like Texans because we bought up all their land. Well, for my second pick, I chose a song that's equally special to me when I'm thinking about you. And it's a song called How Sweet It Is by James Taylor. Now, this is a song that I love. James Taylor is one of those artists that I associate, with you and I listening to in the car, like George Strait, like the Eagles. Those are early bands that I just remember loving. Just artists. It's what sparked my fire for music. I'd say probably those three: James Taylor, the Eagles, and George Strait were three that really just from childhood I couldn't get enough music. I couldn't get my hands on enough music after hearing those bands, and have always had pretty eclectic taste. My genres run from country to western swing to rock to bluegrass to electronic. I mean, really everything. And I think it's because I was exposed to such good music so early, and James Taylor was so talented and so able to I think create time and place. Like when I hear a James Taylor song, I feel like I'm in a certain time and place, even if if I'm listening to it today, I still feel like it's 1984 or something, and you and I are in the car together. And I think the other reason that this song is so special is this was our the song that we danced to at my wedding. And so this has always been a favorite. James Taylor's always been a favorite. And then I think I don't maybe you'll remember what year this was, but I don't. He's one of the artists that you and I have seen live together as well. We saw him for Father's Day one year at Starplex in Dallas, the old Starplex. It's not there anymore. Oh, I mean the venue might be, but it's not called Starplex anymore. But do you remember that when we saw him out there? It was an outdoor venue, one of my favorite concert venues growing up. But yeah, we got to see him. It must have been '90s. Do you think it was the late '90s we saw him in Dallas?
Yeah, I think it was, and that was one of the greatest Father's Day presents I ever got. Was you got us tickets to that to see James Taylor, and I've always been a big fan of his also. And man, it was a great time. Uh, when did you leave Denton and go to California?
I left Denton in 19 well, I left Denton in 1995, so I guess it must have been early 90s.
Ye-
I moved to
Yeah,
California in 95, yeah.
yeah, you were still at school at North Texas
Mhm.
when we went and saw James Taylor.
Yeah, that's right. So it must have been early 90s. Wow, that's been a long time ago. And I hate doing that math, every time I start talking about years and I think, "Oh, that was 5 or 6 years ago or 30."
Well, at least you're young enough you can do it by in your head. If I have to do numbers as old as I am, I got to get a calculator.
Well, I think that it's quickly approaching, and the fact that the two of us have managed to make it through, an episode without having lots of dead air while we're trying to remember something is, I think, a miracle in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, Dad, thanks so much for sharing what you're listening to and for joining me on the show. I mean, honestly, my love of music comes from you, and listening loud comes from you. I've talked about that, I think, on the show when I guested on Matt and Sammer's show, and we talked about my Desert Island mix. I told them about how not only, do you and I love to listen to music together, but we love to listen to it loud. So much so that my husband teases me that if anybody ever tried to steal my car, they wouldn't get out of the driveway because they'd have a heart attack when the ignition started because the music's so loud.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's something we've always done. I always remember hearing it in the house. And again, whether it was, Leaving on a Jet Plane by Peter, Paul, and Mary, or a Jimmy Buffett song, or a Patsy Cline song, or Loretta Lynn, or Hank Williams, or, remember when we got, I remember you even bringing home the Thriller album for us, or a Lionel Richie album, I mean,
Yeah.
we always had music on, and I'm so grateful for that. And so this was super special for me to have you join me on an episode. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad we have those good memories to share.
Yeah, me too. And to our listeners, please join me again next week to find your new favorite song.